All right, welcome back to On the Ball, the podcast series from the Vanderbilt Sports and Society Initiative. I'm Andrew Maraniss, and our guest today is an old friend, Rob Chura, who we were just talking before we got started here. We probably have not seen each other for over 30 years, which is pretty hard to believe, but we were both students here at Vanderbilt at the same time in the late 80s, early 90s. Rob, thank you so much for coming back today.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. Always good to be back in Nashville and back at Vanderbilt. So, yes, my pleasure.
Yeah, so you've got your SLUH shirt on today, which is St. Louis University High School.
Yes.
In St. Louis. You just got off the road, drove in. Are you here for football-related reasons this weekend?
Yeah, actually, I am. Yeah, I'm going to attend practice today and catch up with Coach Shoup, who just kind of got back into the program. If you remember, John Shoup was part of the program when I was playing. So they've been great contacts. And I was actually in my current role as a coach, wanting to get a little insight into some of the things that the current Vanderbilt offense is doing. And so Coach Shoup was able to set that up for me. So looking forward to that after our chat today.
Oh, that's great. And so you mentioned you're coaching at the high school. You're also teaching at the high school. You're the director of global education at that high school.
Yes.
For those who didn't follow Vandy football in the 80s or 90s, you were a kicker on the team, successful kicker. I think you set a record for field goal attempts in one game. You made a over 50-yard field goal in another. You never missed an extra point your entire career. What do you remember most? Like, is there one kick or one moment in a game that like really stands out from your time here on the team?
Well, I don't know that my career was that remarkable. I'm glad that you were able to spin it in a way that sounds so much better. I don't know that there was, I guess, the 51-yarder against Navy that was kind of a special one. I mean, one just to kind of, at that time, 50-yard field goals were a little bit rarer than they are now. So that was nice. But also going into that game, I kind of injured myself the week before, and just kind of remember that whole week. The week before I had a bit of a rough game against Kentucky. So there was some uncertainty around my ability to go and just how well I'd be able to play. So for that to be a day that actually turned out to be pretty well for me. My sister and brother-in-law were there visiting at Navy. It was just kind of a neat day in general.
Yeah, and you were here at a time, you crossed over, you were recruited by Watson Brown and his staff, then Jared DiNardo comes in as the head coach and has pretty immediate success. Like, what did you notice about that period of Vandy football and how that corner was able to be turned at that point?
Yeah, well, I think just accountability was really the big thing. Coach Brown was great and, fantastic human being. I owe my existence at Vanderbilt to him and great guy, hands down. But I think, Coach DiNardo came in with a very tried and true approach. I mean, he'd had so much success at Colorado and, as a player at Notre Dame, and I think he just had that disciplinarian and, authoritative air about him and, really challenged us and showed us how to be successful. I think, we, immediately, without a major recruiting class, went from a 1-10 team to a 5-6 team that next year. So, it was like, for me, it was, I think what really got me excited, to the possibility of coaching in the future. And he just, had a huge impact on me. I think guys say all the time, I'd run through a wall for them. I mean, really, I know from my standpoint, he was a guy that I would have done anything for. Just really had a positive, really positive role model.
Oh, that's great. And I promise we're not going to just reminisce about 1990s Vandy football. What you're doing with the global education program at your high school is really what I want to talk about. But before we get to that, I know you also, it's a rare case where a varsity athlete is also on a club sports team. And so tell us about that experience.
Yeah, that was exciting as well. So I played hockey my whole life growing up. That was really what I thought my athletic future would be. So yeah, my brothers and I, we were all big hockey pucks in St. Louis when the Blues were kind of getting established. And when I came to Vanderbilt, we didn't have a team then, and obviously my major focus was on football anyway. But just walking across campus one night, I saw a flyer up said, if anybody's interested in forming a club hockey team, so I think I called whoever it was, we started practicing over at the Centennial Sportsplex there. And then, somehow one way or another started putting some games together. We played Tennessee and Wash U and I think Emory as well. So, it was kind of an abbreviated season, but was fun that first year. That was right at the tail end of Coach Brown's era, and when Coach DiNardo came in, either he knew or it somehow came up in the conversation, and I thought, wow, he's going to be really impressed by this. I'm a two-sport athlete, and he kind of explained like, that's done. You're not going to do that anymore. So it was a brief little two-sport thing going on. Lots of fun, but understand obviously why I had to focus my priorities elsewhere.
Yeah, and then one last thing that was a little unusual for members of the football team. You were a Russian major, is that right? Or Russian and German, or which was it?
So I double majored in Russian and German. I'm a Ukrainian American, so obviously Russian kind of was always my priority as far as studies. But yeah, languages are something that I was always fascinated by and seemed to come to me fairly easily. So
okay, and then so your career now at St. Louis University High School, you've been there for decades, correct?
This is my 28th year right now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what is your role there? What are you teaching, and what do you do besides the global education program?
Yeah. So I was hired in 1997 as the full-time Russian teacher. I had this crazy idea when I was here, and I can remember sharing it with my parents that I'm going to be a Russian teacher and coach football, and they thought like, where are you going to do that? They're actually, I kind of had the place that I work at in mind. In St. Louis, I went to DeSmet Jesuit High School, the other Jesuit high school, but St. Louis U High, the kind of traditional older Jesuit school, has always had a Russian program, and I thought like, wow, wouldn't that be perfect? And I kind of checked and saw that the teacher that was currently there was sort of near the end, so the timing worked out perfectly. I've been teaching Russian there, all four levels for about the first 20 years or so. And then when I was asked to take on this role of Director of Global Education, I moved back to two levels, and now my wife actually teaches the other two levels. So that works out well additionally. So
yeah, wow. And so I know that the high school and St. Louis University Jesuit school, when we talked on the phone maybe a week ago, I could tell that you had a real strong connection to the Jesuit tradition and what it means, both as a school and the education aspect, but also the social justice aspect. For those who aren't familiar with it, like how would you describe that philosophy?
Yeah, Ignatian pedagogy is what we call it, and the Ignatian mission, is like you mentioned, very much one of reconciliation and justice, social justice. There's also obviously the academic excellence that goes along with that. But I think Jesuit schools across the world, and they are everywhere, have always been about going to being called to the frontiers, and whatever those frontiers look like. And at this stage in the world, being called to those frontiers is going out and, we're such an interconnected, smaller world than what you and I remember. So going out and encountering all those different cultures, all those different parts of the world, to be a better global citizen. We're all citizens of our cities and our countries, but we're looking to develop that ability in our students to recognize what it means to be a global citizen and to work towards reconciling and fixing some of the issues that affect us all in the world.
And so this global education program, did it exist when you arrived at the school, or is it something that you started?
It formally it did not exist, but that's I think kind of what drew me into it and why I was asked to take on this role. One of the things that I said in my interview when I was becoming the Russian teacher was that I wanted to get kids the opportunity to experience other cultures, and obviously I was speaking about Russia at the time, and I had worked for 2 years in study abroad for the University of Illinois, and so I had those contacts, and so that was kind of how things started. For about 20 years, I had my own program in St. Petersburg, Russia. I took my students there. We went and did service projects. It was I think a real bonus for the Russian program. Our Chinese teacher had a similar program in Nanjing, China. Our Spanish teacher had a service program in Yoro, Honduras. And so there were all these things happening, but they were kind of happening in silos. And I think, our administration went through a process of like, who do we really want to be? We called it Visioning 2018. It was our 200-year anniversary. And so Global Ed was kind of one of the things that came out of that. And, with me being experienced in that world, I was asked to take on that role. At first, I sort of said, well, let's see how it goes. And after about 3 or 4 months, I thought, I can't believe I ever was, wishy-washy about this. Like, this is really meaningful work that, like, just inspires me every day.
Wow. And the reason we reconnected was I had posted something on Facebook that was an article from a magazine in California about a Venezuelan family that had been in the United States for 35 years, had been doing everything by the book in terms of, checking in and all that. And yet they were deported. And the story was that they were in Mexico. And you commented, I was just in Matamoros and saw many things just like this. So set up the story of like, why were you in Matamoros? Who were you there with? What was this all about?
We were in Nogales.
Nogales, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. They were in Matamoros, I guess. The family was.
Which is right on the Arizona-Mexican border.
Okay.
Nogales is kind of split in half with the Mexican side and the Arizona side. But regardless, that's again another project that kind of came our way. There's a group called the Kino Border Initiative, and it's right down there on the Mexican side in Nogales. Started several decades ago. A local nun, started this process of helping the migrants who were coming to the border to try to find opportunities to legally, and I stress legally, enter the United States. And so, just kind of on her own, she started cooking for the migrants who were on the Mexican side, and providing shelter and clothing and things like that. And eventually, it picked up more and more steam until the Jesuits got involved. And, currently, Sister Tracy Horan is in charge of it. Being with Jesuit roots, they reached out to some of the schools that are a little bit more active in projects like that. And so we were invited in, and about, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little more, we sent the first group of students down there to have this immersion experience where, they Kino Border Initiative does such a great job of, what they call it, humanizing, accompanying, and then complicating. So they bring the kids down, really allow them to see the situation with their own eyes from all angles. They don't just show you the things that that are obviously very supportive of their mission there. But we meet with Customs and Border Patrol personnel. We meet with the local ranchers. We go to the coroner's office actually to see some of the results of people who tragically try to walk through the desert and just the crazy conditions that they encounter, and the horrible outcomes, unfortunately. So just so that they understand the reality of the situation, and then there's that complicate part of it. So, like, how do we fix this all? There's obviously, nobody's wrong, nobody's right. Well, in fact, in a lot of ways, everybody's right. There's it's a very complicated issue. What do you think? How do we fix all this? And so that was what I had recently done. We had sent kids down there, and I just coordinated it. But this was a year where I had some time in my own schedule, and I wanted to see it with my own eyes and better understand it, so that we can be a better partner. KBI has asked us to, kind of bring their mission to St. Louis and to other, parts of the U.S. that maybe, don't get as good of a look as our kids do. And so, that's something that we definitely want to, help move that cause forward.
Wow. So seeing it with your own eyes this year, did you meet people that were still attempting to migrate to the U.S. as well as people who had been recently deported?
So, a little bit of both. But it's a totally different world than perhaps the group that went last year. Obviously, there were, a lot of changes in policies recently. And so because of that, the numbers, the demographics just look a lot different. But, the first day I was at the shelter there, and, they serve 3 meals a day to the migrants who need it. And I was trying to use my best Spanish, and about the second person that I was handing out food to just said, "Oh, no, put it over here," with perfect English, no accent whatsoever. And I was kind of taken aback. And he said, "Yeah, no, I'm from Phoenix. I've never lived a day in my life in Mexico, but unfortunately, like the story that you put in the Facebook post." I'm the one person in my family who doesn't have American citizenship, and so I was deported, and that was the situation for a lot of the people who are currently at the shelter. Is it's people who've been recently deported, and they're trying to find kind of what that next step is. They're hoping that maybe there's going to be some change in policy, or some other opportunity to legally go back to their home. Really, they don't know anybody in Mexico. They're just kind of stuck there, because of the situation.
How many kids did you have with you on this trip?
We had 9.
And were they juniors and seniors, or how old were these kids?
It was all different levels of students. It's a program that actually, to our kids' credit, there's a lot of interest in. Fortunately, I think 10 is about the most that we can bring just from a space standpoint. But at first, I think we had about 18, 19 kids signed up, and then, they may be found. We do a lot of different service projects at the same time. So some of those kids went to some other sites, but it's definitely a full boat each year. And, the kids that come there are really there. They're giving up their spring break to do this really hard, challenging thing, which, especially the first 2 or 3 days, we had some reflections in the evening, and, they said, like, I knew this was going to be hard, and I knew this was going to be emotionally draining. There was no way I was prepared for this, though, but they were also inspired at the same time, but I'm so glad that I came, because, now I can take this back to SLU.
Yeah, I can't imagine how profound of an impact that could have on a young person. I mean, kids volunteer for projects all the time, but to be thrust into current events like this, in such a time of uncertainty, danger even. I imagine you had some parents that were worried about their kids going down there.
Sure.
But in your observations of them, or in those reflection moments, were there specific encounters they had that really stand out to you, that shifted maybe the way they were thinking, or that you think will never leave their mind?
Oh, I'm sure that those kids will, those memories will stay with them for a long time. I think, like I was talking about, KBI has this little, they call it hack, humanize a company and then complicate. And I think that humanizing part is the stuff that's going to stay with them for for a long, long time. There were some people at the shelter who were, kind of more the typical profile of, they were from Ecuador and, they had kind of moved their way up and, were sort of in limbo there at the border. And there were some, younger kids and, there was one little boy in general, in particular, who, our boys were just like heroes to him. And, just playing basketball with him and just the little interactions, you could just tell that, they, again, that humanizing piece, this is not just statistics. It's not just things they see in the news. Like they know this kid and, they care about him. And, I'm sure, that they continue to kind of wonder like, hey, what's he doing? Where, I wonder, how his life is going to be impacted by, the situation that he's caught in. And, this boy, he's a little bit insulated from it, like kids can sometimes tend to be, but, it's reality. And, I think that's obviously the big thing that we're trying to accomplish is for this not just to be something that they read about and hear about, but something that they really experience face to face.
On the complicate side, like I can imagine the kids, or if I was on this trip, I would feel like such empathy for the people in this situation. You say you met with Border Patrol and ranchers and law enforcement. Like, was there a side to maybe to another viewpoint that did complicate the issue for them?
Oh, definitely. I mean, talking with and accompanying the Border Patrol officers. I mean, they knew that we had already had our experiences with KBI, and so they wanted to make sure that we understood like. Yeah, we totally understand as well. We're human beings, but like here's some of the real sticky points in our world as well. And again, I think the kids did a really good job of taking that in and really understanding that it's never that simple and things are complicated like that.
Another global hotspot right now is Ukraine. We've talked about the fact that you have Ukrainian roots. You majored in Russian here. I know you haven't necessarily taken students to the middle of a war zone, but you have been there fairly recently. Is that right?
Yes, I have. I've made some trips since the war began. And then there was also, obviously the war began in 2022, late February. I had a trip scheduled already to visit our Polish Jesuit schools in Gdynia and Kraków. And the timing of it was such that, I was there like day 10 or so after the war began. And you can imagine Poland was just inundated with all of these Ukrainian refugees, and it was just a pandemonium in a lot of ways, especially when I was in Kraków, which is down near in the south of Poland. I met with the school and certainly, did some kind of formal things just to see how some of our partnerships were developing. But there was just a huge opportunity to help. Literally every 15, 20 minutes, a train or a bus would come in with Ukrainian refugees who were just like shell shocked, like they had no idea where they were. I tried to, take one like elderly couple and get them to go into an elevator, and like they were kind of freaked out by that. They weren't sure like what where I was taking them. You can imagine people were just like running for their lives. So that was kind of the beginning of it, and that was when. Again, seeing it firsthand, I thought, is there some way that we can continue to kind of accompany and do what we can? So I've brought kids over, and with our Polish partners, especially that first summer, we did like a summer camp for the Ukrainian peers that were there in Kraków and Gdynia. My students all study Russian. that group of refugees. I mean, most Ukrainians speak Russian to some degree, and there was kind of that element of it too. Like our kids were able to use their real skills to communicate with people. More recently, I think, understandably so, Ukrainians are not so excited about speaking Russian. So that part of it has fallen off a little bit. But myself, I've been able to. We have a student who is a refugee from Ukraine, from Kyiv. I was able to visit him before he came to our school. That was my first visit. And then I also stopped off in Lviv at Jesuit Refugee Services there, again, just to kind of see what we could do. And then more recently, over this past winter break, I was able to go to Ivano-Frankivsk and Kolomyia, and also back to Lviv, and we've been able to set up, we call it SLU Language Academy. Developing English language skills are useful especially for refugees in so many parts of the world. So we've been able to set up Zoom calls where at 7:30 a.m. in St. Louis, we get on the call with the kids in Lviv and Kolomyia, and the kids just talk, but it's all in English. It's a way for our kids to get to know their reality. One time we were on with the kids in Kolomyia, and the lights went out. We thought that maybe like the call dropped, and we could hear them in the background saying, no, that's just, the electricity goes out from time to time when Russia's attacking in certain areas. So like, that's just reality. So, our kids kind of see that and, develop a little bit of a relationship, and, they learn a little bit about, what's going on in our world, which, even if that just gets their mind off of the situation for a couple of minutes once a week, definitely worth it.
Yeah. Wow. And you're continuing to help coach the football team throughout all of this as well? My coaching has kind of gone through a couple of different stages. I coached for 20 years at St. Louis U High, was the offensive coordinator. The guy that I worked for retired, and then, it kind of was one of those times where you sort of reevaluate, like maybe, I'll do something different. Coached at Wash U, Division III football for 7 years. Again, another great, pretty much just like Vanderbilt, but Division III instead of Division I. So great opportunity to kind of stretch myself a little bit, do something different. More recently, just I kind of felt bad about that I really wasn't able to give that as much time as it deserved. And so I've transitioned back and taken a job as a offensive coordinator at a different high school, not the one that I work at. Just, obviously the opportunities just didn't line up, but it's good to be back in high school football again. Yeah, I can imagine. So, as someone that grew up as an athlete and a sports fan, but now is involved in such, serious humanitarian issues, like, how do you view sports, its role in the world? Has it changed at all given these experiences you've had?
Well, I think, as you get more life perspective, you hear from your coaches all the time about, this is all about the relationships that you're going to build. And, like these guys, your teammates, these are going to be guys that are going to be, best man, groomsmen in your wedding, things like that. And, again, when you're 20 years old, it kind of, goes in one ear, out the other. You certainly understand the brotherhood, but you don't really kind of get that bigger picture. And I think, I a lot of times do try to, kind of draw some parallels between some of the things that I'm currently doing and, maybe some of those past experiences. And I think, the great thing about athletics, and especially at the college level, is it brings out the best in people. Sometimes, it brings out some not so great things, but generally for the most part, when you go out to practice every day, everybody's given their best for the same cause. I've kind of thought about that and tried to maybe even think of if there are some ways with some of my global opportunities to involve sports, which kind of naturally brings out that, positive energy, how can I recreate that with some of the things that we're doing in global ed? And haven't figured it out yet, but, I think anytime you engage in something that's ambitious, that has a mission, it's, mission driven, has high, lofty goals, those are the things that really, you feel alive when you do stuff like that. So the same thrill that I got playing football at Vanderbilt and some of the, big things that happened in that 5 years, it's that same feeling that kind of motivates me to be involved in some of these other things.
Oh, wow. This is an incredible story. I know you've got a busy weekend ahead of you. It's really fascinating to hear about what you've been up to, since the last time I saw you on the field here at Vanderbilt. And clearly you're a example of what a student athlete can be and how, this experience can propel someone to do things that impact the rest of society. So congrats on everything you've got going, Rob. Thanks for joining us, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And like I said, always great to be involved in some way, and high praise from someone that I respect like yourself.
Thanks, Rob.
Mm-hmm.